Welcome to Rivers in the Wasteland. I'm your host, Amanda Williams, and today I'd like to introduce you to two good friends of mine, Austin and Aly Kirkpatrick. Austin and Aly have walked through some serious trials in their first several years of marriage, but the first one paved the way for a miraculous, only God type of story. Here's my conversation with Austin and Aly. Thank you guys so much for being here with us today.
We're so glad to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's going to be a great night.
We have been friends for years and did ministry together in Arizona for over a decade. That kind of makes us feel old or sound old, but we're really not, I promise. The timeline of the story that they are going to be sharing with us today actually runs alongside my story that I shared in a previous episode about waiting to get pregnant with my second daughter, Isabel. All right. Well, the first thing I wanted to do is let our listeners get to know you guys a little bit. Can you tell us where you first met?
Aly and I, we met in Kansas City. We were both in high school and went to the same school and went to the same church and kind of knew from a little bit of high school sweethearts. So,
Nice.
Yeah, that's how we met.
And you not only have Blakely, but you guys also have your little guy, Beckham. And how old is he now?
He's almost 18 months. So Blakely's 4, and then Beckham is almost 18 months.
That's awesome.
Yep.
You guys are not originally from Arizona, right? You guys didn't always live there. Where are you from?
Yeah, we originally were both really from Kansas City area and went all the way through high school, like we said, how we met. And it was about 2011 when, or 2013 is actually when we moved out to Arizona.
Nice. And you guys were just dating when you moved to Arizona?
Yeah. So we moved here and we were still kind of, we had been dating long distance for a season. And then when Austin moved here, I was like, well, I guess I need to go too, obviously.
Obviously.
And so that's kind of how that worked out. And then we dated here for, I think like about another year and a half before we got engaged, and then got married like 6 months after we got engaged. So yeah, so we've been dating since, or not been dating since, we've been together since 2011, but married since 2015.
About how long into your marriage was it that you guys thought that you were ready to start trying for a family?
It was about the beginning of 2017. So about almost 2 years into our marriage. And really just thought it was going to be super easy. Like, why wouldn't it be, you know? And so early 2017 kind of started that whole journey, and really didn't know what kind of the path ahead would be, but yeah, 2017 is kind of when it all started, I guess.
About how long into the journey of trying before you guys started to think, okay, maybe this isn't going to be as easy as we thought, there might be a problem?
Yeah, there was, I want to say it was about at like the 1 year mark, or maybe like a little bit before 1 year of trying. And I remember we had went to just like a women's doctor here locally, and pretty much they were just like, yeah, well, sometimes it takes people like at least a year. So, you know, if you're still not pregnant in another like 4 or 5 months, then like, you know, come back and we'll kind of do the next steps or whatever. Which didn't totally sit right with me, because I just felt like it shouldn't be taking this long, you know, like we're young, we're healthy, or so we thought. And, you know, just it wasn't understanding why it wasn't happening. But yeah, it was about at around that point that I think, you know, I'm such a planner. And so I just kind of had it in my head that, okay, we're ready. Like, now's the time, we're going to do it. And it's just going to happen. And like, boom, 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 all the things are going to line up. And so then when it was just month after month after month after month, and nothing. It was just, okay, like this wasn't expected. This wasn't planned. So what do we do?
Yeah. After that 1 year mark, maybe another 4 or 5 months down the road, where were your minds and hearts at that point? How were you processing that journey?
We were pretty reserved about it. Not a lot of people knew. Not a lot of people knew that we were trying to get pregnant and that we were struggling to get pregnant. And we really kept that between just the two of us for a really long time. I think, when you're a young married couple, kind of after you've been married for a little bit, it's kind of natural for people around you to be like, hey, like when's there going to be a baby, And so we would always have people asking us and kind of in like a joking, kind of teasing way, like, hey guys, like, come on. And because people didn't know that we were struggling, sometimes that was kind of like a dagger to the heart, because we just wanted to be like, we're trying, like we are working on it and it's not going how we thought. And like, this is frustrating. And so it really, we kept it to ourselves for a long time. And like didn't even tell our families really until things escalated to the point where we were like, okay, we kind of need to move forward with some testing just to like check things out, see where we're at. Like, is there a problem? What can be done? Like, and so that's kind of when we looped our family in and like close friends in to kind of just the whole situation. And so that kind of leads to like, it was August 2018, I believe, is when kind of all of that kind of came to a head there.
And what happened around that time?
So we had decided to go in for some testing and kind of went through all the steps, the whole process, met with fertility doctors, and we're kind of waiting on some test results. And that kind of leads us to a very like pivotal moment in the journey that I think Austin and I, it's kind of seared into our memories forever, was a very specific phone call that we received from the fertility doctor that we were seeing. I'll let Austin jump in here and pick up with the rest of that, how that went down.
Yeah, I think up until this point, I think for me specifically even, was just kind of always having the mindset of like, hey, it's going to happen. It's going to work out. Not sure why it's taken so long. It's kind of crazy. But eventually it's going to, it's going to work out. And just kind of after through a series of tests, we finally got a phone call, and I'm a youth pastor. And so it was we had a youth night on a Tuesday night, and we were preparing for service. All of a sudden, it was in the middle of our pre-service prayer, getting ready for the night, that Aly gets the phone call. So we both kind of go and find a spot in the church, and it was in the process of really that phone call that the doctor just began to communicate that, hey, we found some stuff in testing, and basically getting pregnant is going to be a real challenge for you guys. It's going to be pretty unlikely. And just immediately, just the realization, hearts begin to sink, obviously. And I think we both just begin to cry and just begin to go, oh my goodness. Like, I think just the picture and the image of just family, of what it, was going to be in front of us, all of a sudden it was like, oh, this is not how we thought this was going to go down. And also being in a place of like, oh, I have a service that I also now have to go lead. Now. And, luckily at that time, really had some great leaders, and was able to pass the service along to some leaders to be able to lead. And Aly and I kind of were able to get in the car, and we went home, and begin to process, and really the phone call that we just received. And I also remember the timing of it all was crazy, because we had just about to buy the home that we're in that same week.
Wow, that's a big week.
Yeah. And the next day we were going to sign the paperwork.
Wow.
And so it was kind of a crazy 24 hours of emotions of getting just the worst phone call we had really could have received, to also the excitement and the joy of getting ready to move into our home we had just bought. And I remember the car ride on the way to the signing appointment. It was about a 45-minute drive. And I just remember we just put worship music on and in the car, and we really didn't say a word. We really didn't talk much in that car ride, but we just kind of began to pray and begin to worship kind of in our own way. And I just know, and I remember so vividly being one of, like, I remember multiple moments in my life of just really experiencing the presence of God, but I will always remember that moment in that car ride of really feeling like God was really in the car with us.
Wow.
And just right in that journey with us, and was bringing about a comfort and a peace in the midst of really chaos.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think another little cool piece is that when we received that phone call, Amanda, you and Eric were youth leaders at the time, and you had kind of known that we were going through some of this process. And, you know, as you said, we were kind of walking along this same journey together and at the same time. And so when we kind of got that phone call, you guys were in the building, and I just remember being in one of the back rooms, and I mean, Austin and I are just sobbing, and like, we can't even see out of our eyes because they're so full of tears. But then we just feel people like around us, and they're praying, and it's you and Eric. And I think Austin's sister was there too. And that was a really, you know, just the whole moment of, from the phone call to then just being like in this big prayer moment with you guys, you know, that was really like a moment that we won't forget. So, yeah.
I remember that night very, very well. As Austin was telling, you know, reliving it, I was like, oh my gosh, I remember all of it. And just, you know, even when you're walking alongside someone that's going through it, and you just believe, you know, like, you know, our Christian walk, you know, we're taught to believe. And then you get a phone call like that, and you see someone get a phone call like that, and it's just jarring for everyone. And, but I do remember the feeling of the Lord's presence there that night. And it was definitely clear that he blanketed you guys with his presence, physical hands. You know, and it sounds like he carried that presence through to this car ride that Austin shared about. And it's just really cool that although it was something that was so painful in that moment, that he was right there.
Yeah.
You know, ready to just wrap his arms around you guys. So obviously, like, you guys had the signing of your house the next day. I'm sure that was, you know, it just all jumbled into one big thing, I'm sure. Where did you go from there?
You know, for a little while, we just kind of sat. We just sat with it. We were really wrestling, like, what is the right next step, and what do we want to do, and what do we feel peace about? You know, that week was just it was just such an odd week because, you know, we signed on our house that has 3 bedrooms, and 2 of them sat empty for a long time.
Yeah.
And so we were trying to be happy about our house, but then we were also like, we have this house that's way too big for 2 people. You know, we bought this house with the hope and the anticipation that we would have other people in it one day.
Yeah.
And so it was just a really kind of like tug of war emotional time.
Mm-hmm.
Just being in the new house, and it just, then sitting with that news of just like, we don't know what the future holds and we don't know how this is going to turn out. And so it was really hard, but we also were just like, whatever we do, we're going to need to have peace about it, whether that's do nothing and just trust that God's going to do it, or do we proceed with like the medical interventions that they're recommending that we do. We really just were waiting, I guess, for a firm sense of peace either way. Until then, we didn't want to make any decision, until we were both kind of on the same page and both felt good about whatever choice we were making.
Yeah. And are you guys different in how you process things as far as like your personalities? Like, how did that play into this? Because this is a big, big thing.
Yeah, I would say we definitely process things very differently. We are probably polar opposites.
Oh, that makes it fun.
Especially in these kind of areas. And I definitely have a very much a more laid back approach to life and to things. And so I'm comfortable. I can sometimes be comfortable waiting. I can find myself being like, all right, it's just gonna work out, and don't know how. Don't have a lot of answers. Probably don't want to really talk about answers, which probably frustrated Aly. Of like, it's just gonna work out, and yeah, and so. We don't need to talk about it. and I'm sure Aly was very much trying to know we need to process it. We need to have these steps. We need to know what we're doing. And because I'm going crazy. And so.
Is that accurate?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty much like, I want to see the vision, see the plan, and then like work to the plan, And so when it's just something like this where it just felt so out of our control, I mean, it just ate at me, like, I mean, it was an incredibly tough season for me. Just like having that desire to be a mom, and like not being able to walk near the baby aisle at Target. Like I would take the long way to get somewhere just to avoid that aisle, because it was just too hard. Or like walking past the empty bedrooms was really hard. And just all of these kind of like normal things in life, or, even just like seeing a mom out and walking her baby in a stroller as I'm driving down the road would trigger something, And so it's like these normal life moments turn into like these big emotional mess moments for me. Just because it was an everyday waiting, Austin and I were kind of talking a little bit before this of just how this whole story of Blakely it just feels like a lifetime ago. She just turned 4. And so obviously it's been several years since we've walked through this. And we were just kind of reliving, I guess, or talking about the last several years and how really this difficult season was really like the first of many, many trials that would come our way just in life. And we just had no idea what was coming for us. So talking about it now, it's just kind of like, wow, like that just seems like it was so long ago and like so much life has happened since then. But it is good to remember the outcome of that, because now, even as we're in a difficult season now, it's like, okay, we need to look back and remember like how God came through in that situation with Blakely. And all the points along the way where he did show up, even though it wasn't maybe working out how we would have wanted. But he was there in the midst the whole time, 100%. And we felt that at so many points along the way.
Yeah. Before the, I know we're kind of approaching the next piece of the testimony here, but before we move on, do you guys feel like in this particular part of the journey, did you have like a verse or a story in the Bible or something that you guys just were declaring? Like,
Yeah. I think the verse that always has stuck out to me just throughout the last several years, as we've walked through some really painful seasons, is in Psalms 34, and it says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted, and he rescues those whose spirits are crushed." And in a lot of seasons where we really felt crushed, you know, those moments are probably the moments that I can vividly like remember and feel the closeness of the Lord in those crushing moments, you know. And there's several kind of throughout the last few years that I can like pinpoint of like God was there with me, and I like no question he was. And then also just, you know, I think throughout just this season, particularly with infertility, you know, clinging on to stories in the Bible of people seeing miracles with children, and you know, like Abraham and Sarah, not that that was necessarily an infertility story, but they were very old, and yet God had promised them nations, and they were like, how is this going to happen? Like, we are 100 years old. Like, no way, no how. And then God did it. And it's just crazy. And you're like, okay, well, if God can get a 99-year-old woman pregnant, like, surely he can get me pregnant, you know?
yes.
So, you know, it was kind of clinging on to some of those stories. And then I also really related to Hannah a lot. The story of Hannah in the Bible, and how she
love me some Hannah.
Yes. She was barren. She felt outcast. She was comparing herself to others, particularly her, I don't even know what you want to call her, her sister wife. I don't know.
Sister wife. Yeah.
She was in such anguish over not having a child. And the Bible literally says that like she cried bitterly to the Lord to give her a baby. And I was just like, well, yeah, that was me, because I was crying bitterly. Like I was a little bit bitter, and I was like, God, like, I know you can do it. So why aren't you?
Yeah.
And like it for me, like through the whole season, it was never a moment of like, can God do a miracle? Like, does that still happen for people? Or, you know, is that even an option here? It was never an issue of that for me. It was like, God, I know you can. And I've seen you do it for other people, and I've seen you heal people in other ways. So why aren't you doing it for us now?
Yeah.
You know, it was never like a matter of if he could, but why he wasn't, you know? And so I always wrestled with that. And I remember just really battling that, like, God, why? You know?
Yeah.
And I don't know that I'll ever have an answer to that, but that's just kind of how things go sometimes.
Yeah. You know, I think that there are many things in this life that we will never get an answer to, but he doesn't promise us answers. He promises us his presence, and that he will walk through it all with us. And I love that you said that you were bitter, because I can totally remember that. I feel like I would get these text messages from you, and I'd be like, oh snap, like, today is not a good day over there.
Yeah.
But I also remember myself being, you know, obviously walking through a similar but not similar, you know. There was always the aspect that I already had a child, so I always felt like, man, this is not the same, but it kind of felt similar in a way.
Yeah.
But I feel like I would have my bad days, and you'd be like, God is faithful, and then you'd be like, why, God? And I'd be like, he is amazing, he's gonna do this.
Yep. Totally.
So I'm really glad we didn't have like the bad days at the same time.
Yeah.
One question I did want to ask you guys, and I feel like a lot of times we hear the perspective from an expectant mom or someone who's trying to have kids, and we don't always hear from the husband, or really even talk about the stress that something like this can in a relationship. How did you guys handle it, walking through it as a married couple? Because it's not just the woman dealing with infertility, it's the man who's also watching his wife deal with the emotions or also having his own. So, how did that whole thing play out for you guys?
It was a lot of good days and bad days. And, I think as the longer it went on, was a lot more probably bad days than good days through it. And I think for me, I really was honestly just trying to be as much of a support to Allie because I knew she was really struggling through it. Definitely knowing like, okay, there's certain comments that get said that, okay, that didn't sit well with her. And so it was a lot of encouraging. It was a lot of trying to like navigate of how to help her through that. And I don't know that I remember spending a lot of time thinking about, my piece. I think I really did feel like through it, like, somehow, some way it's going to happen somehow.
Yeah.
So, I think it really was a lot of trying to figure, okay, how can I get us through this together?
Yeah. That's great.
I do think when it was all said and done, like I think we really grew in this season, and I know we're probably still somewhere in the middle of walking through the story, but I do think through this, like you really look back, it was these little victories and it was these big victories that all of a sudden it gives you confidence. It gives you confidence in your partner. It gives you confidence in God. And I think it really did grow, our relationship through it.
Yeah. Well, you're such a great supportive husband, and how wonderful that God saw ahead and paired you guys together with someone that could support like that. It's so nice that God thought like, okay, like she needs someone to support her in this way. So I'm going to give her a super chill husband who's rock solid in his faith and will believe that I will totally come through without any doubt. And I know, like, just from being, around you, Austin, for so many years, like, you've got that unshakable faith, and it's so consistent and it's so comforting. And I can only imagine, how amazing that was for Allie during this season. So good job. Kudos to you. So you guys had, I call it the phone call. It's in my notes, in quotes, the phone call. You guys had that experience. You processed that. But you talked about waiting to do anything until you felt complete peace. So can you kind of take us to this next part of your testimony? What did you actually settle on? Like, what did you feel peace about doing? And where did you go from there?
Waiting for peace is a fascinating thing. I think I do remember that was a thing I think a lot we were praying for, especially when we were trying to make a decision on, okay, should we go a medical route? Should we go a medical intervention route? Obviously, that also costs money. It'd be amazing if that was free, but it's not, and it can be expensive. And so that was a component as well. Obviously, it's also doesn't always result in success as well. And so that's a factor to weigh. It's also not a simple process, and it can be a long process. And so we were just trying to navigate all these things. And, we were approaching, at our church, we have a legacy offering that takes place every December. And we've participated in it since the kind of our beginning of our marriage every year. And as we were just kind of approaching, I just kind of felt like, we should give an offering that was substantial in this year. And, begin to pray about it, and dropped the idea to Aly about it. And as we kind of just begin to navigate it, we kind of begin to pray about it. We just kind of begin to go, yeah, I think this is the right thing to do. I think we should do it. Basically, the money that we would pay for this procedure, let's give it to legacy. And, I don't know that I think the pastoral side of me, I feel like I want to say, like, obviously we don't give to get, and we don't give an offering to get a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we have to be very cautious and not be reckless in the things. But at the same time, I do believe I felt the Lord speak that we should do this. Mm-hmm. And so I think when you hear the Lord speak, you have to say yes through that. But so we did. We gave in that legacy offering. And, it wasn't long after that things began to change. So
before you go on, did you, Aly, feel when he brought that to you, did you feel like in your spirit right away that was the right thing? Or did you kind of struggle with that? Because it seemed like the way that he talked about it seemed like it was like, we're going to do this in place of this. Mm-hmm. And now you had an answer for what you guys should do. And this was very opposite in their earthly realm. So did you wrestle with that at all, or were you on board?
I remember agreeing, like, it didn't take long for me to be like, okay, yes, like I feel like we need to do that too. Because I think we were just in such a place of like desperation, and we were at kind of a point of like only God at this point. And
yeah.
So when Austin brought that up, I was just like, you know what? Like, let's just do it. Like,
yeah,
we've gone as far as we can go in the natural sense, and we know the options, and we aren't really like feeling super strongly about going the medical route. And so we were just like, you know what, let's just do it.
Yeah. What did it feel like to lay that down? I feel like this is a total lay it down at the altar before God moment. What did that feel like to you guys in your spirit?
I would say, I think it felt like being obedient. It wasn't about a transaction. Mm-hmm. God, I feel like, hey, you've put this in my heart so that we can get a miracle. It was, hey, I think God's putting this in our hearts to do this. I think we're supposed to do this, and we got to be obedient. And so I think putting it down, walking away, I think it felt good because it was, all right, we said yes, we were obedient.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is, so that was in like December of 2018. And then Austin and I went to, I don't even remember what exactly it was. It was some type of leaders retreat up in Prescott, Arizona. Just him and I went. And I remember at that service, and this was in January, like maybe 3 weeks after the legacy offering, maybe 4 weeks after. It was early January. And I had a moment with God at that retreat that I felt like gave me the peace that I was looking for. And I remember walking back to the car after that night and just telling Austin, like, I just feel like the Lord is giving us the peace to be like, you know what? Either way we choose, Like, it doesn't matter which way we choose, because we were really wrestling like with the medical intervention route, because we felt like maybe that was playing God, or and so we were struggling, like, do we do that or not? And I felt like God spoke to me so clear at this service that night, and he was just like, forget about all of that. Which one, like, are you feeling peace about? That's all that matters. Like, if you feel like I'm giving you peace for this, then take it, And so that was a really interesting moment for me. And I felt like that was a very, like, again, like, kind of another moment where I just know that the Lord was speaking to me there. But in true human fashion, you can kind of have these moments with God and you're like, oh my gosh, like, this is awesome. Like, I'm feeling great. So much peace. This is wonderful. In true human fashion, though, after we came back home from that trip and got back into just normal everyday life, and we were still trying for a baby, and nothing, month after month goes by and nothing. And I start to not feel that peace anymore, like, that I felt like God had given me. And I felt like I had kind of picked back up the pen of the story, and I remember kind of just talking with Austin and being like, you know what, like, I think we just need to move forward with this fertility doctor and start the process with them on this procedure and get the ball rolling, because, like, I am done waiting.
Yeah.
And this was like in March of 2019. So at that point, we had been almost 2 years trying for a baby. So I called the place and I scheduled the appointment. It was on a Monday. And I had scheduled it several weeks out, because, these places aren't fast and you have to book out. And so our appointment was in, like, several weeks down the road. So that week comes around, I scheduled it purposely also for, like, when I would be starting my period, so I would know, like, okay, this is another unsuccessful month. And so I was already anticipating this is going to be unsuccessful, so we're just going to schedule this appointment, here. That week came, no period. And I'm like, well, this can't be. Took a pregnancy test, negative. I was like, okay, of course it's negative. Like, it's always negative.
Yeah.
So, like, Wednesday goes by, Thursday goes by, Friday goes by, no period. I'm like 4 days late at this point. And I'm still getting negative tests. And I know I have this appointment on Monday. And so I'm like, it's fine, like, whatever. And wake up Saturday and I'm like, I'm going to take one more test. And what do you know? That's the positive test.
That's amazing.
So sorry, I'm like, this part you can cut out.
No, I don't want to cut it out.
But it was just like another part of the story where I had picked back up the reins, and I can only imagine God being like, yeah, you go ahead, you schedule that appointment, and then just you wait. And so of course, like, I get the positive test. I'm like, this cannot be, like, no freaking way.
Yeah.
And so I don't even know. I mean, we were very happy, obviously, but we were also just like, is this real? Like, is this real life? Like, this is the first, like, I don't even know how many tests I had taken in the 2 years, like, and they were all negative. And so, after countless negatives, and then you see a positive test, you're just like, this can't be real. Like, it's a little bit of a shock moment of like, am I dreaming? Like, is this really happening?
Yeah.
And so I was just I mean, I remember like standing in our bathroom and just being like, this, like, is this real life? Is this real? I don't know. Like, pinch me,
Yeah.
somebody.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so I called first thing Monday morning to the office and I was like, hey, so like we have this appointment scheduled today to like come in for the first kind of portion of this procedure, but like I think I'm pregnant. And they were like, okay, well, like just come in and we'll like do your labs and we'll just double check and make sure everything's, trending well and everything. And so we still went in for our appointment, but it was, a totally different reason at that point.
Yeah.
It was just a simple lab draw. And so obviously they confirmed and we didn't end up having to go back there because we didn't need to.
Wow.
And so that was another just really kind of a crazy moment of like God stepping in at the last minute and being like, I got this,
Yeah. Yeah. Did you make that connection right away of the legacy offering and your active obedience to the timing? Do you guys feel like when you think about that, do you feel like there's a connection there, or do you guys just feel like it just was a coincidence?
Well, I think obviously we don't believe in quick coincidences. I think we believe that God works through things, and I don't know if initially that we made the connection, and I don't know if how much of a connection it plays. I think at the end of the day, I think it's the grace of God. It's the grace of God that we do things, and I think even through Aly's story, even of just going, hey, I'm picking the reins back up, and yet all of a sudden it's still like, then we get the answer. Like we don't get miracles because of anything that we've done. It's the grace of God that we get a miracle in Him moving. But I do think that we go through journeys and we go through trials and we go through storms, and God teaches us things through it. And I think one of the things, with that connection of things, it was, can you say yes? Can you be obedient? Can you trust in every arena and every area of your life? And I think those are things that we learn. Can you learn to wait? Can you learn to still serve? Can you learn to still love me, worship me, say yes to me in the midst of going through a trial and in the midst of going through a season of waiting? Can you still work in the kingdom of God, move in the kingdom of God, do what God's called you to do while you're waiting? And I think the answer was yes, that we found in that season.
That's awesome. Do you remember when you told me and I was like, what?
Yeah. I remember being nervous to tell you too, because I knew we were in this season together and we were, we would have our check-ins every so often, like, okay, did you get another negative or, and then,
Yeah.
and so I remember feeling like, obviously very overjoyed. And then I'm like, how am I going to tell Amanda,
Yeah.
But you know what? That's just like God too, to just do it for us at the same time and
Yes.
literally 2 weeks apart.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it was just wild. Even the timing of that was wild. And I knew that when I told you, like, I knew you were so happy for me, but I also knew like you were still waiting, and I'm glad that you didn't have to wait too much longer.
Yeah, that was pretty close. When you guys shared that, it was so encouraging. And I think that that's something that it's easy to kind of, when we're walking through long, painful seasons, it's really easy to look at other people's joy. And I feel like the enemy starts to allow us to kind of feel bitterness or just kind of frustration, I guess is the word. been looking for, but I found it so encouraging because I was like, yeah, like he did it for them. Like it's going to happen. And like Aly said, 2 weeks later, I got to have the same conversation and we got to tell them that we were also expecting. And me and Aly got to be pregnant together, and we used to go to Costco and have pregnant lady dates and get our $1.50 lunches.
Yep. Yep. Those are great days.
Those are great days. Yes. But yeah, Austin, I love what you said about just the grace of God, because I feel like there's such an opportunity here to make the connection and put it almost like, yeah, we did this, so God gave me this. And I love that you made that distinction that it is by the grace of God that he does miracles and that he blesses us with things, because yes, he does call us to be obedient, and that does delight his heart when we are. But it's because of his goodness that he gives us things that our hearts desire. And I know that you guys have had many different trials since this, but God really set the stage for a great display of his faithfulness to you guys. And I just love that he did that at the time that he did, because he also knew that you would experience trials, in the next couple of years that were more intense than you probably would have even thought of going into marriage. The things that you guys have walked through within the first 8 years of marriage is just wild. And but I think that he gave you guys this miracle, like this amazing display of his faithfulness, as such a beautiful reference point. And I know that you and I talk pretty often about the current things going on, but that's why, I don't know, when I thought of you guys, I just kept thinking about Blakely. I'm just like, it's been 4 years, since she was born. So almost 5 since all of these events. But it's just, I hope that you guys will walk down memory lane as often as you need to remember that exact thing that he did for you, because he's just as close now. He's just as right there with you guys when you're having your bad days right now as he was in the car ride with you on the way to sign your papers. Like he's so present. He's so for you. He's not done. He has more miracles ready to do in your lives. And I just love that he gave you her as a gift, because she's literally like this constant reminder running around your house all day long. Like she's in your face. She's, doing all the things, and she's being 4, as awesome as 4-year-olds are. But she's a living, breathing testimony of his faithfulness. And how beautiful is that he did that for you?
Yeah, it's a great reminder, because obviously children change your world and your life. But the person that she is, the personality she has, the joy she has, like she has been kind of like our rock almost in a lot of ways in this family, carrying us through a lot of hard seasons. Like, as Austin and I have walked through really painful situations, and Blakely has no idea what's going on, but she's just as happy as could be. And just the joy and the light that she has, like, God knew that we would need her. And
he did.
I don't know why we had to wait so long to get her, but I couldn't imagine it being anybody else. She's just the best. And I remember I was looking back on some like Instagram posts that I had when she was a baby, and on one of them I wrote that God gave us like double the joy in her for all the trouble it took to get her. And he just blessed us, because she was just the easiest, most happiest baby. Like, just, it's kind of rare, honestly, like just how perfect she was. And didn't really totally realize that until now. But, she just carries this joy with her that we didn't know we would need in our family. And I think even outside of just our immediate family, but even just, Austin's parents, my parents, like, I think everybody can just agree that, like, she just has this sense about her. God just knew. He knew that she would have a very pivotal role in her family, even at such a young age, we would really need as we walked through some really painful situations. So,
I love that.
yeah.
Absolutely love that.
I do have one more thing to say, one more little ending statement.
Go for it.
I think you had mentioned, like, obviously it's rivers in the wasteland, and so it's kind of this God's goodness in hard situations and in desert seasons. And I felt like just kind of as this season for us was a desert season, where it felt really dry and desolate and barren and nothing could grow and there was no life. I felt like throughout that whole process, and then even just in the years that would come for us, like these desert seasons that we've walked through, like they have created some really massive opportunities for us that we wouldn't have gotten had we not walked through those seasons. And like seasons like this, as much as they really, really stink, and it's really painful to walk through hard situations, but like it has grown us in a very indescribable way, like even just as a couple, and like the strength that has brought us together. It's stretched us, it's stretched our faith, it's taught us so many things about ourselves, about each other, like how we process, how we navigate emotions, like, and even just like inwardly, it's taught me so much about myself. It's taught us so much about God, because we've really had to lean on him and rely on him for so much. And it's also seasons like this that allow God to show up.
Yeah.
And as painful as that is for us to be in that kind of limbo season, like it just makes, when God does show up, it makes it even bigger, and it's kind of that only God moment that, like it was him, like there's no other option, And so, looking back throughout the last several years, like I can see God woven throughout. And I know that he has shown up big for us in the past. And so I love just kind of being able to go back through some of these details that I don't think about as often anymore. But that are like very critical, important pieces that, can remind us that God hasn't left us. He's not forsaken us. Like he's still working, even though we can't necessarily see the outcome yet, but he is. And just trusting in that. After you've gone through so many and you've seen God's faithfulness proven in your own life multiple times over and over again, like, not that it makes the current seasons any more manageable, but like it does give you kind of that hope that like, okay, I've been in the valley before, but I've came out of it before too. And I'm just in the valley right now, and we're going to get to the other side, So
absolutely. And that, I think that it gives you another layer of your foundation, like for that to be stronger. And I'm just looking at the verse, like for the verse that this podcast is inspired by, Isaiah 43:18-19. It says, "But forget all that." So imagine if God is saying like this huge miracle that I just did for you with Blakely, but forget all that. It's nothing compared to what I'm going to do. For I'm about to do something new. See, I've already begun. Do you not see it? I will make a pathway in the wilderness. I will create rivers in the dry wasteland. And every time we experience God doing something huge, he still has more to do. And that is the promise of this verse. And he is just wanting us to stand on the promise over and over and over again. And the more we do it, just like you're saying, the more we grow from things, the more that we learn, the more we are stretched, we're going to end up less shaken, fewer doubts, more strength, more resolve, more faith. And I think that you guys are such great examples of that. And I know that you probably still have lots of questions about the things that you are currently walking through, but it's right here. It's his promise, and he's done it for you, and he's going to do it again.
Yeah, I love that.
Absolutely.
Well, you guys, thank you so much for being with us tonight. I truly appreciate it, and I will let you guys know when to expect to see this on the podcast.
Yay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, guys. Good night.
Bye.
Absolutely. Good night.
Austin and Aly showed steps of true obedience with no guarantees that life would turn out the way they had hoped. God didn't wait until delivering that positive pregnancy test to show them he was faithful. He was there making himself known every step of the way. Even when Aly thought she would take matters back into her own hands, God was gracious and blessed them with the daughter he knew they would need. He is faithful and he is good, and he is both of those things even when it's hard. He never guarantees we won't have trouble, but he does guarantee he will be with us in it and through it. Thank you for joining us today. If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave a rating or a review on your listening platform. And don't forget to follow or subscribe to be notified of all upcoming episodes. Remember, God is at work today, making rivers in the wasteland. If he can do it for them, I know he can do it for you.